Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I'm your host, Brock Talby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. So it is a Tuesday episode and it is December 1st. It is crazy. We are past Thanksgiving, we are into December. And last week started college basketball season. So I'm usually in a collared shirt if you're watching on YouTube and you're used to the video version of this podcast. I'm usually in a collared shirt, but today I'm going with an IU hoodie. I'm a huge IU basketball fan, so I am repping my team today. They are playing in the Maui Invitational. Yesterday they dominated Providence. They won by over 20 points. Today we are playing Texas. They are a ranked opponent, but based on what I saw yesterday, I think that IU is going to win, and I think they are for sure the better team. Then again, I'm pretty biased. So if you're watching the video version and you're used to seeing me in a collared shirt and looking all professional, I have my IU hoodie on today because I got to support IU. We will move into our first Tuesday segment. It is Congratulate or Commiserate. So for my three teams, I went 2-1 in my Reality Sports Online Dynasty Style League. I was the high point scorer. I was led by Kirk Cousins, Antonio Gibson, Amari Cooper, James Robinson. It was a great showing for my team this week, and I already had the playoffs pretty much locked up based on I played two of the lower ranked teams for the last 2 weeks, week 12 and 13. So I wasn't really in any danger of losing, but it's nice to see my team carry some momentum into the playoffs and be the high point scorer this week. And then in my 12-team Superflex League, I was also the high point scorer, also led by Antonio Gibson, AJ Brown, Derrick Henry. It was a really good week for my team. Really good week. High point scorer again in both leagues. My 10-team standard league, this is the only league where I was in danger of missing the playoffs, and it is going to be a tall order to make them now. I played against the guy I mentioned on Saturday that I was playing against the guy that had Will Fuller. So he started off really hot on Thanksgiving, and then I played Zeke. So I started off really poorly. With Lamar Jackson testing positive for COVID on Thursday, I had to find a streaming quarterback option. And I was leaning towards Kirk Cousins, and then someone in my league dropped Cam Newton, who had a great matchup against Atlanta, and he had been pretty solid the last few weeks. Him and Kirk Cousins had similar scores. So I ended up going with Cam based on the rushing floor safety. I figured he would probably rush for a touchdown, maybe throw for one touchdown, and it was against Arizona, which was a plus matchup. That did not pan out. Cam Newton only scored me 3 points, while Kirk Cousins was the QB3 on the week. So I made the wrong choice there, but it didn't really matter because the guy I played against scored over 150 points. It was the highest points scored this season in that league. So I really didn't have that much hope of winning, especially with Zeke coming out so flat on Thursday. And then my other starting running back was Josh Jacobs. He sprained his ankle, he fumbled, he only finished with 2 points or something. So I got 4 points out of my two starting running backs. Luckily I was able to put some decent points up for that point tiebreaker that is going to come in crucial for deciding if I get into the playoffs or not. I had AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Dallas Goddard, and Ronald Jones all show up for me. So at least I was able to put some points on the board. Just would have looked nicer with Kirk Cousins in there instead of Cam Newton. So what can you do? 2-1. I'm a lock for 2 playoff spots, and then this week I need to win and hold on to the points tiebreaker to get in. Even if I win, there's a scenario where 2 other teams, if they both win, I could still be out even if I win. So we'll see. I'm on the bubble right now. Week 13 is very important for a lot of people I know. So you are not alone out there if you are on the playoff bubble. So we will go to a listener now. David wrote in on Twitter and said that he scored the second most points in the week, which was jump-started by Will Fuller on Thanksgiving. So you were on the other side of the Will Fuller play. But he lost to his opponent's Tyreek Hill among other high-point scorers on the week. So that is the worst way to lose when you're the second high-point scorer. And starting Will Fuller on Thursday, it looked like you were sailing through Sunday. And then Tyreek Hill to come out and drop like 50 fantasy points. That's very unfortunate. I am sorry, David. Hopefully you can bounce back. Hopefully this doesn't decide your playoff fate. Hopefully you are safely in the playoffs and you can bounce back next week. So we will get into the high flying or nose diving segment. This is where I look at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and I talk about someone who is on the upswing, who's rising, who I think is going to make a difference in your next few weeks through the playoffs, and then someone who's nose diving, someone I'm concerned about and why I am concerned about them. So my high flying quarterback this week is Kirk Cousins. So he was my other streaming option, like I said, and I did mention him on my Tuesday show as my favorite widely available streaming option quarterback. Cam Newton is owned in like 70+% of leagues in ESPN, so he was not mentioned in my streaming quarterback segment last Tuesday. And I would have gone with Kirk Cousins had somebody not dropped Cam Newton in my league. So he was my other streaming option. I chose poorly, but he was very good this week. One of the reasons I was hesitant on playing Kirk Cousins over Cam Newton was that he didn't have Adam Thielen. Thielen tested positive for COVID last week, so he was out on Sunday. But that did not stop Kirk Cousins from having a fantastic day. Like I said, he finished as the QB3 on the week. He now has 4 straight games of really solid fantasy production. He threw for 3 touchdowns in 3 of those 4 games. And then in that 4th game, he threw for 2 still. The schedule doesn't look that inviting after Jacksonville this week. He does get the Jags this week, so great matchup. Play Kirk Cousins. But he was good against the Bears in week 10, which was a tough matchup. So I think he's viable in any matchup, really, because the weapons that he's surrounded by. He's got Dalvin Cook that he can dump off and get long touchdown passes to on short air yards. And then he's got Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. When you're surrounded by that much talent, the matchup is kind of a secondary concern. So in my Reality Sports online league, I am playing Kirk Cousins. It's a 2 QB league, so I played him and Cam Newton this past week, and I was the high point scorer despite Cam's struggles. But I'm leaving Kirk Cousins in my lineup for sure. Cam, on the other hand, is probably going to my bench. My nose diving quarterback, it's kind of a 2-pack here. I'm going to do my nose diving quarterback and wide receiver at the same time. It is Desean Watson and Will Fuller. So Will Fuller was a candidate for my high flying wide receiver. He had been pretty consistent on the year. He had a couple mediocre weeks before blowing up this past week. But it came out yesterday that Will Fuller and a cornerback on the Houston Texans have been suspended for 6 games for performance-enhancing drugs. So Will Fuller came out and posted on Instagram that he was steered wrong by a medical professional, someone he trusted. He didn't know that it was a banned substance. Tough to believe that when you're a professional athlete and this is your living and you're making millions of dollars based on if you play or not and how you play. It's hard to imagine that you wouldn't pay really close attention to what you're putting in your own body. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt, but yeah, so he's gone for 6 weeks. Anyways, my nose diving quarterback is Desean Watson. I had talked about his schedule the last couple of weeks. He's got tough divisional matchups with Indianapolis the next 2 weeks, or 2 out of the next 3 weeks, and then that 3rd week is against the Bears. So it's not the schedule you want for Desean Watson going into your playoffs. And now that he's out Will Fuller, his top receiving option, it just makes it that much tougher for Desean Watson to stay relevant. He has been on fire. So I don't think that I would have the courage to bench Watson in any scenario unless you have Watson and like Pat Mahomes or something, or Russell Wilson. I don't know why you would have both of those, but I'm probably not courageous enough to bench Watson. But I'd be starting to sweat right now if he was my QB1, and that's why he's in the nose diving section. He loses his best receiving option, and he's got tough matchups the next 3 weeks. I don't know if you can feel confident with Desean Watson going into your playoffs, but I don't think you can bench him either. So he is my nose diving quarterback, and Will Fuller is my nose diving wide receiver. Also, this is a contract year for Will Fuller, so it just seems very stupid to not pay attention to what you're actually consuming for Will Fuller. Anyways, my high-flying running back is Antonio Gibson. The last 2 weeks have been a fantastic turn of events for Gibson owners because he's finally getting the lion's share of the work instead of splitting evenly or even taking a little bit of a backseat to JD McKissick. Up until the last 2 weeks, yes, Gibson was getting the touchdowns. He's actually one of the league leaders in touchdowns now. I think he's like second with like 11 or something like that. I might be a little off there. But he's one of the league leaders in touchdowns now. And with him claiming a majority of the work, I'm sure he's going to be a staple in a lot of championship lineups. Hopefully, I'm included in that. I have Antonio Gibson in two of my leagues, my Reality Sports Online Dynasty Style League and my 12-team Superflex League. I did have him in the 10-team Standard League, but I traded him mid-season when he was getting less work than JD McKissick. I traded him for Ezekiel Elliott based on Ezekiel Elliott's upside. That did not pan out. I wish I would have just kept Gibson. But at the time, everyone in my league was mad that the Zeke owner traded Zeke to me for a guy that was splitting carries with JD McKissick. But he definitely got the better end of the trade there. So hopefully I can ride Antonio Gibson to two championships, even though I lost him in the one league. My nose diving running back, it's the same guy that was here last week. It is Alvin Kamara. And it's crazy. There was a top 5 running back from New Orleans this week, but it was not Alvin Kamara. It was Latavius Murray. Kamara and Murray both only had 1 target in the passing game, and Murray received 19 rushes to Kamara's 11. And that resulted in a huge blow-up game for Murray. He had like 140 yards and a touchdown. Kamara only had like 50 rushing yards. But I wouldn't read too much into the rushing split. It was a really weird game. Denver, if you weren't aware of the situation, Denver's whole quarterback room got put on the close contact COVID list Saturday. So they actually went into the game with a practice squad wide receiver starting at quarterback. And the poor guy only threw 9 passes. He completed 1 pass for 13 yards, Noah Fant. So he was 1 for 9 for 13 yards, and then he had 2 picks. So Sean Payton definitely did not need his full strength. They won by like 30 points, and Denver was really nowhere near competing. There was no way they were going to threaten to win this game at all without a quarterback. So it makes sense to rest Kamara and not risk your star running back and just run Murray. But the passing game work is concerning. Taysom Hill just is not going to throw passes to Kamara. And with Drew Brees, the injury kept getting worse last week as we heard more. He has like 11 cracked ribs. He had a collapsed lung. I think he's going to be out for longer than just the 3-week minimum on the IR. And looking around from medical professionals and other fantasy analysts, it sounds like that's the general consensus, that Drew Brees is going to miss more than just the 3 weeks. So with Taysom Hill starting, Alvin Kamara definitely takes a hit, and he is not going to be your RB1 in the playoffs. He probably got you to the playoffs. Your team's probably sitting pretty right now, but I don't think you can count on Alvin Kamara in the playoffs with Taysom Hill at quarterback. My high-flying wide receiver is Debo Samuel. It's been a super long wait. He had so many injuries all year, and this is a guy I was super high on coming into the season. He was top 15 wide receiver in my preseason rankings. But I think the wait is going to pay off in the last 5 weeks of the season. I saw a crazy stat. The Debo now has 250 yards or something around there, 250 receiving yards on negative 41 air yards in his last 3 games. So he's taking all these short behind the line scrimmage passes, and he's getting really big gains out of them, which just shows how good he is. He's a playmaker, and the 49ers are going to use him. And even when Brandon Ayuk comes back from the COVID list, I think they're still going to use Debo a lot. I think Ayuk is going to take a backseat to Debo. Both will be involved, but I think Debo is the guy that the 49ers are going to rely on more. And he's just so fast and so good. I actually ended up playing Debo Samuel this week in my Reality Sports League because I didn't want to rely on Chase Claypool playing if this game ended up getting canceled. So I put Debo in instead of Claypool, and that worked out nicely. We already went over my nose diving wide receiver. It is Will Fuller. Hopefully he can avoid any more troubles next year in whatever team he's on. My high flying tight end is Dallas Goddard. So he was my top free agent pickup last week, and now he's in the high flying section. It's been back to back touchdown weeks for Goddard, who appears to be the only reliable piece in a floundering Philadelphia offense. He led the team with 10 targets on Monday night, and he should continue to be a top red zone receiving option. The only concern with Goddard that could derail his top tight end potential is a quarterback change. I don't think Jalen I don't think Jalen Hurts would be worse than Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz has been atrocious, but we just don't know how Jalen Hurts would distribute the ball. We don't know if he would give Dallas Goddard 10 targets in a week. So that could be the only worrying thing, but with the tight end landscape the way it is, Dallas Goddard is my starter now in my 12-team Superflex league, and he's going to probably remain my starter throughout the entirety of the playoffs. I had Noah Fant. At one point, I've tried Logan Thomas. If you don't have a top tight end guy and you picked up Goddard last week, I think you stick with him despite the struggles in Philly and even through a quarterback change. My nose diving tight end, it's really hard to pick anyone here, but I'm going to give it to Noah Fant. He's completely unusable right now. And even before they played this last week without a quarterback, where the quarterback only completed one pass, Noah Fant was already pretty unusable. He hasn't scored since week 2. He's been really low yardage. He's not getting used that much. So even when Drew Lock comes back or whoever they decide to start at quarterback, I don't think you can trust Noah Fant. I dropped him, like I said, for Dallas Goddard. And my opponent actually in my 12-team Superflex ended up playing Noah Fant when Mark Andrews went on the COVID list. So yeah, that worked out well for me. Avoid Noah Fant. But outside of him, all tight ends were kind of bunched together this week. There's no obvious misses and no blow-up standouts. It's just kind of all mediocrity across the board. So we'll move into our final Tuesday segment. It is straight fire from the waiver wire. I'm going to go through my running back, wide receiver, and tight end targets for the waiver wire pickups this week. And then I will give you a couple quarterback streamers as well at the end of the segment. Because week 12 has been extended through Wednesday for the Ravens and Steelers game, your waivers might not run until Thursday. I think in my 10-team standard ESPN league, it looks like it's that way, that the waivers will not run until Thursday morning now. So you have a couple days to get this stuff in. My top target at running back this week is Devontae Booker. So it's a pretty sparse week at running back. Josh Jacobs left with an ankle sprain, which is supposedly not as bad as it initially looked. And based on what I've read today, it sounds like Jacobs has a decent shot at suiting up this week. But if not, Devontae Booker could be the starter against the New York Jets, which is a very good matchup. And Booker has been pretty decent this year. He's gotten a decent amount of run. He had 81 yards and 2 touchdowns 2 weeks ago. That was also the game that Josh Jacobs had a really big game. And Booker's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. So he's a solid start if Jacobs were to end up missing the game. He might be a backup, and he might not even start this week, but I would grab him if you have Josh Jacobs, or if you have a hole at running back and you just need to grab a couple guys and start one of them. Maybe Devontae Booker becomes the starter. It sounds like Jacobs might be okay, but he's still my top pick just because he would be a starting running back against the Jets if Josh Jacobs were to miss. And this backup is my top running back because the other running back selections are not very good. My other top pick would probably be Cam Akers. He's had 2 solid games in a row, but Darrell Henderson led the backfield in touches, and Malcolm Brown led the backfield in snaps. So Akers is a flex play flyer in deep leagues only. I would not pick him up in any kind of 10-team league and start him. He made his day on like one 60-yard run, and then he got a touchdown. So he did get the 1-yard goal line carry, and he got the goal line carry touchdown last week too. So I don't know. Out of these 3 guys, I'd probably still start Darrell Henderson over Cam Akers, but I would probably start Cam Akers over Malcolm Brown at this point. It's just a toss-up. Edo Smith, he ended up being the better back in Atlanta with Todd Gurley out. So he would presumably be the starter again if Todd Gurley were to miss this coming week. So you could pick him up, similar to the Devontae Booker situation. If the starter's out, he would be the starter. Nyheim Hines is the most consistent running back play for the Colts, and I think he's a decent pickup in any kind of PPR format. In a standard league, I'm probably not interested. I assume Jonathan Taylor will be back from the COVID list this coming week. So then you have Jonathan Taylor and Jordan Wilkins both to compete with for carries. Nyheim Hines is going to get most of the passing work, but yeah, outside of a PPR league, I probably wouldn't look Hines' way. My top wide receiver to grab is Allen Lazard again. So he's been my top wide receiver to grab. I think he was a couple weeks ago. So he's finally back. He's fully healthy, it looks like. And with Marquez Valdes-Scantling being banged up before the Sunday night game, Allen Lazard took hold of that number 2 spot in Green Bay. MVS did play. He didn't receive a target. He didn't make a catch. He was just kind of used for a decoy and blocking. I assume this was because he was questionable for the game. He was banged up and they didn't want to rely on him. But even so, it was encouraging to see that he was out there, but Allen Lazard was the second option. Lazard's playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback on one of the top offenses in the league, so that's always a good thing to have when you're looking for your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 options. So I would pick up Lazard, and he can be a spot start when you need in any given week, really. If you have injuries or COVID issues, I mean, you could play Lazard in your flex and be totally fine. By the way, I'm not giving fab amounts for any of these guys this week because we're so close to the playoffs. We're close to the end of the season. Some people could be out of fab. It's really hard to gauge where you're at with your fab. So if you need these guys, don't be afraid to spend up. I don't think there's anyone worth spending up for this week. So I would probably hold on to my fab unless you are on the cusp of making the playoffs and you need a play. Then you can spend up if you need to get a win this week. But if you're already comfortably in the playoffs, I would not spend up on any of these guys. I would save my fab for the playoffs. Other wide receivers to consider outside of Allen Lazard, Sammy Watkins is healthy now, and he should end up being the wide receiver 2 for Pat Mahomes. Despite his quiet return this past week, he only had 4 catches for 38 yards or something. He kind of took a back seat to that huge Tyreek Hill game. But Sammy Watkins is healthy, so he should be the number 2 in Kansas City. Kiki Kuti, he will be more involved in Houston now with Fuller suspended. And actually, the Texans released Kenny Stills like right before the Fuller news dropped. So they don't have Kenny Stills either. So Kiki Kuti he's going to have to be more involved out of necessity. I don't know if that'll translate to fantasy relevance at all, or if Brandon Cooks will just get a ton of targets. But Kiki Kuti is out there. Colin Johnson, he was good for the Jags this week, but both Chark and Chris Conley were out. So I wouldn't bank on Colin Johnson's production to continue unless the injuries to Chark and Conley also continue. But when you look back at the scores from last week and you're looking at your wide receivers available, and Colin Johnson is the top scoring wide receiver from last week that's out there on your waivers, you might want to grab him. But I would closely monitor the Chark and Conley injuries before you do that. My top tight end target, if you're still searching for a starting tight end, is Trey Burton. He has 2 straight weeks with a touchdown. He had 6 targets again this past week, and he's a top 20 tight end on the season despite missing 3 games to start the year. He's only rostered in 6% of leagues, so yeah, I would start Trey Burton. If I had Noah Fant, I would definitely pick up Trey Burton and start Trey Burton over Noah Fant. I would have been doing that already, but it looks like most people aren't since he's only rostered in 6% of leagues. It's an offense that utilizes the tight end. Phillip Rivers utilizes the tight end, and Trey Burton's the best tight end on the roster. So Trey Burton is my top target of widely available tight ends. Obviously, if Dallas Goddard is still available in your league, I would pick up Dallas Goddard over Trey Burton. I don't think that's a question, but he is rostered in nearly 80% of ESPN leagues now. So it definitely bumped up the last 2 weeks after he came back from injury, and he's looked really good. He was the top tight end this past week. So if Dallas Goddard's out there, get him. If not, Trey Burton is definitely out there for you to pick up. Outside of those two, it's really pick your poison with Dalton Schultz or Logan Thomas or Tyler Eifert, whoever you want, really. It's all kind of random, that low at the position. So if you can't get Goddard or Trey Burton and you don't have another tight end option on your roster, I'm sorry for you. And we will wrap up with my favorite quarterback streamers of the week. Kirk Cousins leads the way again. He was my favorite streamer last week, and that panned out. He has been on fire as of late, and he is widely available in most leagues. Like I said, I'm planning to leave him in my Reality Sports Online lineup. It is a 2 QB starting lineup, so Cam is going to the bench, Ryan Tannehill's back in, and I'm riding Cousins. I'm probably going to stick with Cousins for the remainder through my playoff run. I don't think I can trust Cam anymore, so it's probably going to be Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill, really. But this past week, I thought Cam had a better matchup, so I put him in over Tannehill. Either way, Kirk Cousins is my number one on that team now since I lost Dak, and I'm sticking with him, and I think you should stick with him too. Derek Carr, he was just awful last week, just the worst. He finished with 0.6 points in my scoring format on ESPN, I think, because a team actually played him. So as bad as my Cam Newton play was, he scored 600% more points than Derek Carr. But Derek Carr has been good on the year, and he plays the Jets this week. So I think it's a perfect bounce back opportunity. If you're looking for a streamer, you can't get Kirk Cousins, I think Derek Carr is a good option. Don't be scared just based on last week. And then outside of those two guys, Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he's starting for the Dolphins, he has a good matchup against the Bengals this week, and I would stream Ryan Fitzpatrick. If Tua is the starter, I would not stream Tua, even though it's a good matchup against the Bengals. I don't think you can trust Tua. He could be benched. He's been banged up. I'd be surprised if the Dolphins go away from Fitzpatrick. I think he gives them the best chance to win, but we will see. If Fitzpatrick's starting, he's a good streaming option. And that will conclude the Tuesday episode. You can check out the website for the Week 13 modeled rankings. Those will be available on Thursday, probably Thursday. There's no Thursday night game, and since there's a game on Wednesday, the rankings might be delayed a little bit, but I'm going to shoot for Thursday still. And those will be available on the website, thefantasyfootballactuary.com. I have standard, half point PPR, full point PPR, flex rankings. All of that is available for free on the website. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it is @theFFActuary. And if you want to watch video versions of this podcast, this episode or any future episodes, you can go to the YouTube channel. It is The Fantasy Football Actuary. If you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like the video for me. That will help me get a broader audience and more people can enjoy the Fantasy Football Actuary content. With that, enjoy the Wednesday afternoon game. I think it kicks off at 3:40 because they didn't want to interfere with the Rockefeller Christmas tree lighting on Wednesday night. So it's a really early kickoff. Just a really bizarre situation. Try to enjoy that game. I know the Ravens are basically rolling out a JV squad. I expect the Steelers to fully dominate this game. Obviously, we won't have any more games until Sunday then. So I will be back here on Saturday. And until next time, keep crunching those numbers.